This is Gavels Down, Voices Up, Veterans Edition, and this week we are going to be talking to veteran, well, I guess not really veteran, active duty Branden, who's going to tell us all about relationships in the military, how it's affected him, how he believes the military impacts or destroys, whatever we're going to call it, marriages and relationships. Branden, thank you so much for being here, and let's get into your story now. Welcome to Gavels Down, Voices Up, where we flip the script on conventional legal discussions. I'm Rachel King, here to guide you through the murky waters of family law, estate conflicts, inheritance disputes, all of the dramas. We're not just talking about law, we're talking about how it affects your life, your rights, your future, and your money. From the courtroom to your living room, we bring you insights that matter. Dive into each episode ready to challenge, learn, and grow. Ready to change the dialogue? Let's begin. Gavels down, voices up. Thanks, Branden, so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
So as we spoke a little bit about prior to talking today, I'm prior service myself. I was in the Army for 7 years and now I'm a family law attorney. And so I see everything. I saw the effect of the military on individuals, marriages, families, kids, the whole nine while I was in the Army, got out of the Army, and then I was the spouse with a deployed husband. And so I went through that whole thing. And now I handle the divorces, especially being in Southern California, of a lot of military members. And so I see just the huge effect that the military service can have on the lives of its service members. And so I really wanted to take this time to hear your story and hear what you think and how you think the military affected your marriage. I appreciate so much you being here, but I don't know how you feel about it. I think this is a very under-discussed topic, sort of taboo.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely under-discussed. It's misunderstood. I think that a lot of people just don't have the experience or the understanding or even the perspective, the proper perspective to know what goes on in these situations, why they happen, how they develop. And yeah, I'm glad to be here to provide some insight to you and all of your viewers.
Listeners, yes. So let's start by, why don't you tell us a little bit about what branch of service you are? You're currently active duty still, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, so maybe your branch of service and how you ended up in the military.
So I was a private tutor for kids, kindergarten through 12th grade, prior to joining. I was 25 years old at the time, and I'm currently 37. It was the best job I ever had, teaching kids. It was the most wonderful thing. And then I went into this Army with this huge culture shock, and I went straight to Korea. So I went straight over there for a year and separated from all my family and friends, and then just bounced around from there.
25 is pretty young, right? I mean, sorry, not pretty young, pretty old, actually. If I remember correctly from my time, 25 is the older side of joining the military. What made you make that career switch?
Teaching kids was the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done. I also worked a lot of other jobs before, between family and otherwise. I also saw a lot of things that my friends were doing that was holding them back, between drinking and partying. And I didn't want to be stuck in that same cycle of bouncing between jobs and not getting anywhere in life. So I looked at what I was doing with tutoring, and it was covering the bills at the point, but I wanted something where I could grow. And I wasn't qualified to be a teacher, an actual elementary school or junior high teacher. I was just helping the kids get through their classes. But I wanted something that would give me more opportunity. And also, I thought one of the most noble things I can do is, I'm a protector. I believe in protecting my family, my friends. And I wanted something to help teach me how to protect them better. It's my biggest desire, I guess you could say, is to make sure that people are taken care of in whatever facet that may be. So I joined for that. And also I felt that if anybody's going to defend me, it's going to be myself. So I wanted to be part of that.
Were you married when you joined the military?
I was not. I didn't really have any. I was kind of a late bloomer with relationships. I had my relationship, I think, at 27, my first real relationship, pretty short-lived. but she was wonderful, taught me a lot about myself and taught me compassion. So she's done well for herself now. She was also military, an MP.
So you guys married, like this marriage is over. How long did it last? Let's talk about that. Did it
Okay.
end because of military service, or was this one that sort of happened and you don't credit the ending of the marriage to, or the impact of the military on your marriage?
So that relationship it didn't develop into a marriage. It was just a regular boyfriend, girlfriend sort of situation. But distance played a factor in it. She was in Hawaii and I was over in Kansas at Fort Riley. But to the marriage point, so I went from, I was stationed at Fort Hood and I had,
It's not called Fort Hood anymore. I was stationed
no,
at
no.
Fort Hood too, and it's not. They changed the name. I was shocked. I was so disappointed. I think for the rest of my
Yeah.
life, I will be calling it Fort Hood. But anyway,
Yeah.
whatever it's called now, right? You probably know. I don't.
Yeah, Fort Cavazos. I'm not a big fan of the change. I'm not a big fan of any of the changes. I believe in legacy. We built these things for a reason, whether it be the names, the history, and or otherwise. And I respect that, regardless of any of those
Whether the
other.
general
Yeah,
lost the war or was a bad
yeah,
person. Yeah,
yeah,
I really liked Hood. I thought Hood was a nice, easy name. It was so kind of basic, but anyway, that's another
yeah,
conversation for
yeah,
another day.
yeah. Yeah,
People higher
absolutely.
ranking than us with more decision making power decided to do that. So
Yeah.
you were Hood and she was in Hawaii.
No, so this one was a couple of girlfriends later. Or a couple of relationships, I guess I should say. She was back home in California, where I'm from, just a city over. And I linked up with her on Instagram. She was a friend of one of my friends. And I just started messaging her. She was real big into fitness. And I thought it was wonderful because I also was very big into fitness. And we just started talking, and it blossomed into something wonderful where we both felt like we could do something together to build a good relationship. We were having some trouble with the distance and knowing that I was going to deploy for a training rotation to Europe. I had just gotten to Fort Hood. It had been a couple of months that I had been there, and I was notified that we were going to be deploying. And so she didn't really have a good income. She did personal training, but it didn't bring in a lot at the time. And so I wanted to be able to help her while I was overseas. So I told her I wanted to spend my life with her. And I said that I already know that she's my person. And so how about we get married and I help her while I'm away? And when I come back, she moves in with me and over there at Hood, and we start that building process of building a life together. So that's what we did. We had a really wonderful ceremony. We got married, and then soon after I deployed.
You are talking very fondly about somebody who is, I presume, an ex-wife. So I am so impressed. But let's talk about, so what happened? You deployed and then, I mean, I know distance. I was separated from my husband for 18 months and it was the worst. Probably should have gotten divorced after that. We didn't, but now
Yeah.
I get all as well. But so tell me there, you got deployed. She was left alone at Hood. Is that what happened?
No, she was back home with her family in California, but she was introduced with a lot of difficulties because, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that I could say negative because
We
I could,
commend you for
but
not. Most people will take the
yeah.
opportunity to talk crap back. You're doing a very nice job.
Well, I'm very compassionate because the spouses, they deal with so much more. I mean, we deal with a lot too, but we already understand the factors involved with our chosen career path. And we know we're going to move. We're used to moving usually by the point that we end up settling down with somebody. Some people come into the military already married, but I think a lot of soldiers, a lot of military personnel develop those relationships while they're in service. And the spouse usually isn't experienced with that type of lifestyle because most people stay in the same area where they grew up. They don't move around very often. Or if they do,
No, I
they're in a
don't. Yeah,
relationship where they
your
can.
wife probably wasn't, fair to say, she probably wasn't totally understanding of the fact that she was going to move to Hood, you were going to deploy, and then she was going to move back. Even if
Yeah,
she knew that was what was going to happen, the toll that takes on a relationship is incredible. So let's talk a little bit about
absolutely.
that.
So she decided to stay in California. She stayed there during the time that I was deployed. And it was wonderful at first because it was, what would you say? It was adventure. And we were planning out things like her coming out to stay with me. And I think it was either Poland or Germany. We were going to meet up somewhere. I can't remember because quite some time ago. I think it was about 5, 6 years ago. I want to say 5. So we planned on these trips in Europe where she could fly out and we can go and roam around and explore and enjoy it, enjoy the fact that I was away. But the hard part for her was acknowledging that she was going to have to leave her family behind when I came back. Another hard part was that the only kind of connection that we had was this way right here over quite some distance and just over video. So we could talk all day, we can text, we can send each other emojis, pictures, you name it. We could still have a little bit of fun. But the thing is that people aren't meant to be away from each other. There are certain things. And I think the 5 love languages,
Yeah.
and I think one of those is touch. And I think if you look at it from a scientific standpoint, people weren't meant to be this far apart from each other. Not at all. You eliminate a lot of things that are like the biochemistry when you touch somebody. There's a lot of things which are taken away. Another part is if you're arguing over text message, that's a big one that really gets messed up in relationships, is arguing over text message. The best thing to do is be able to see somebody so that way you can communicate properly. Because half of what I say isn't just the words, it's the body language. You can tell the sincerity, the genuineness behind the message that I'm trying to convey. And so quite often messages would get misconstrued and it would spark arguments, and it was just not healthy to be away at a distance. So that's what actually did start happening with us was I would say something and I would think that I'm being compassionate and nice and comforting, and it would be misconstrued and then turned into something negative. And I'm sitting here trying to defend myself at that point. And then now I've lost credibility with my spouse, that trust with her. And it's just absolutely awful. It puts a lot of strain on relationships when they're not prepared for that situation.
And I don't think you can be prepared, right? Again, my husband and I were both in the military, and so we knew what was going to happen when he deployed. And yet I was grossly unprepared mentally to deal with kind of exactly what you're talking about, right? And it was so incredibly difficult to have that trust. I don't, maybe powers greater than us are why we were able to make it through, but it is, you just simply cannot prepare yourself. And
Yeah.
I think what you said about spouses is exactly right. Like if you're not military, even if you're military, you understand it. And so maybe, theoretically you get it, but when you're not surrounded by it and you're not in the military, it's really foreign. So how long did that marriage last? How did it kind of break down, if you don't mind talking about it?
So it lasted 10, 11 months. We got married a couple months before I flew out. And then she told me, I flew out, I think it was February. And then I came back around January. And in December was when she told me that she wanted to completely be done. She wanted a divorce. And yeah, so I went through Christmas over there in Europe, technically alone.
How did that feel to have her do that? And how did she tell you? You hear all the time that it's Dear John text messages or letters. How did she tell you that she wanted the divorce, and how did it make you feel?
So just to give you some update of where I'm at right now, I'm actually going through a separation. I was just engaged. I just switched duty stations from Hawaii to here. And I'm still a little emotional over losing my relationship with my ex. So forgive me if I look a little bit emotional in my face, because even this morning I had anxiety and I've been going through depression and immense sadness over that relationship. But it also has.
Well, you only talk about what you're comfortable talking about.
No.
I'm so grateful actually that you even are here talking about it, because it is so emotional. Everybody that goes through a breakup is strewn with emotion, anxiety, depression. And I think especially as a man, we kind of think that men don't feel this, and then add in the military. So the fact that you're here talking, I think, is really, really helpful. And we should all be talking a little bit more about not just the effects of a serious relationship ending, but also, or especially, the effects that the military can have on those relationships. So we will take our time, and you take too as well.
Yeah. Well, started with an apology. Sorry, I can't do this. And it was, I need some space. That was It's actually what I've noticed the big indicator is start to see a little bit withdrawal from your partner. And then the phrase of I need space always comes up. And it's very on the receiving end. It's hard because I'm over there in Europe. I am thousands of miles away, and space is what they want. And
And you're
you're
like,
caught off
I'm got
guard. You're like,
the whole world's space, right?
yeah, I talk to you once a day because of work and time that I'm allowed, and then also what time of day it is here versus there. And I'm like, what? How do you want more space? And what, to me, the way I interpret it is it's a way of trying to separate from the relationship by letting those emotions, so that way it makes the separation easier. That's the way I interpret it. And it's really hard because for me, I do like control over situations. I'm not a controlling person. I'm very easygoing. But when there's a problem, I think it's a commonality with men is to solve your problem, figure out a way to resolve it. And when you're introduced with a problem that you cannot control, that you cannot come up with a resolution to, it becomes extremely difficult to cope with it. So yeah, she started out with, I want space. I said, okay, I'll give you space. And then it just became more of desperation on my part because now here I am thousands of miles away. I can't see you. I can't touch you. I can't have a conversation. I can't sit down like a normal couple. Normal relationships when you're in the same place. I mean, generally you're living together and you come home and you're able to sit down with that person and say, hey, what are we doing here? How can we move forward? What can I do for you? What do you need from me? Maybe I'll sleep on the couch tonight, but we still see each other. And we don't have that in the military. Generally, once that idea of I'm going to start separating communication and that idea of space, it just, that's the end of it. There's no way to come back from that. I think there was, I don't know who it was. There's a famous person in history, and maybe you'll know this situation, but the person had said, and I want to believe it was a president, said that they could sit somebody down and like sit a couple in a room and lock them in there for a period of time, like 10 days or something. And that after those 10 days, that their arguments or disagreements would be over and they'd have an understanding and move forward in their relationship. And I think that really speaks volumes because I think the one thing that people need to do when they're going through problems is communicate. It's not the separation of communication. It's being willing to say what needs to be said, coming to an understanding of what you can do for each other and moving forward. But when people are dealt with, when they're introduced with a difficulty that they don't know how to overcome, it's either fight or flight. And if they're not a fighter, they're going to fly.
And do
They're
you
going to go
think
away.
that the military interferes with, this is in all relationships, right? But do
Yeah,
you, at least from your experience in your relationships, that the military interfered with that ability to come together and to communicate during hard times?
absolutely. I'm on a training rotation. It would absolutely be feasible to send me home, even if it's on my own dime, send me home for a period of time, be able to work it out, and then come back healthier. But the military, and I get it for a combat deployment, completely different. You are needed to do your job. And that's a whole other understanding that the spouse needs to have. But when it comes to training rotation, send them home. Send them home for a week, for 2 weeks, then bring them back. Are they really that important?
Right. I remember I had gotten out of the army. I joined off of active duty. I joined the reserves. I was in the reserves. I think at the reserve, I think I'd had a few months in the reserves. My husband was in Iraq. And the army deployments at that time were about 12 months. He got 2 weeks R&R. We'd decided that we would push off his R&R till the last half of his deployment so that we had
Hmm.
the rough part done first. So this whole thing is planned, right? You're in the military. And it happened to be that the week that or the 2 weeks that he got sent home for R&R, it was a week, one weekend, and another week, were the week that I had drill for the reserves.
Oh no.
Went
Yeah.
to my unit and I said, I'm not going to be here. Like I put in the request, I'm not going to be here. And they said, no, you have to be, like it's a PT test in the range or something. And I said, and you haven't.
Oh my gosh.
So then I said, no, I'm not going to be, like I haven't seen my husband in 8 months. He's coming home for 2 weeks. This is the one weekend. I'm not, we have kids. Like I'm not coming home. I'm not going to R&R. And I ended up, in this particular situation, I guess I've always been whatever. So this says a lot about me and why I'm not in the
Yeah.
military anymore. But I emailed everybody, right? I went all the way up the chain to the people that never want to hear from somebody like me. And I said, we all are going to talk about this in one meetings for everybody from my first line supervisor all the way up to brigade and division. I said, I'm in the reserves. We can do another PT test or another range some other day. My husband is deployed. You don't need me here, so I'm not going to arrive. And you can do whatever UCMJ you think is necessary. But if you're
Yeah.
going to do that, you should really let me out of the reserves because this is a really bad fit, right? I'm always going to be putting my spouse for a variety of reasons. That email resulted in them saying, why don't you just not be in the reserves anymore? And I said, that
Yeah.
is perfectly fine. But that to me is one of those things that, like you're saying, why wouldn't you? Why, for not even for me as the service member in the reserves, for the service member that's active duty in Iraq and hasn't seen his spouse or his child for 8 months, you don't think he needs that weekend? He absolutely needs that weekend with his family.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I bet we could do a whole series just on all of the stupid things that we don't understand that the military did.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're here for. It does have a profound effect. And so, do you think if they'd approved you to go home during the training exercise, that would have helped your relationship?
I want to say there was a slight possibility. And I think that is always worth it because finding someone that you can spend the rest of your life with, I think, is worth everything. But I will say that it was really hard on her. So it may have helped for a moment, but I do think with her specifically, it may not have helped enough. I think that it was just too much to cope with between my being away and also between when I come back, the idea of her, yeah, leaving her family. She's very family oriented. She loved her family. She was always around her family. And so I think that put a lot of strain on her.
So,
Um,
let's talk about the next relationship that I think that's the one that you just recently are going through, right? Is that
yeah,
correct? So, not to pour salt in a wound, but
no, go for it.
let's
Go
let's
for it.
talk about what specifically you think in the military resulted in sort of the breakdown of this relationship. Let's take a quick break. If you're navigating the twists and turns of divorce, you might be wondering, getting divorced, now what? That's actually the title of my upcoming book, designed to guide you through the challenging and emotional process of divorce. It's packed with real life stories, expert tips, and motivational insights to empower you every step of the way. While it's not available just yet, you can join the waitlist to make sure you don't miss out. Head over to rachelkingattorney.com to sign up to be the first to get a copy and enter to win a free signed copy as soon as it releases. Arm yourself with the knowledge to move forward confidently through this challenging time. Now let's get back to the show.
So, a little backstory because it kind of plays into it. She's a nurse from Canada, and she moved to Hawaii because that's where she wanted to live. So she's already open to the idea of moving away from her family. Although she talks with her family every day, they fly out to see each other all the time. So again, very family oriented. But that's the place where that was her dream to move there. But like for her, that is her dream. That is the one thing that she wanted, was to have a life over there. So her and I started dating, gosh, it's about 2 years ago in January. She had just moved there. I swiped her up before anybody else could. And it was the best relationship I've ever been in my life. We didn't have any problems. We always talked things through. We supported each other. We went through so much in 1 year. It was absolutely ridiculous. But we never argued. We never fought. We always talked things through and just supported each other. But at the beginning of the relationship, I decided to sign indefinite on my contract. And I had no idea that I had found somebody that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I had no idea at all. And I didn't know
You can't just undo those contracts.
no. You can submit a request for voluntary separation, which is something that I later asked her if she would want me to do that. Because honestly, the military is only around for me for what, 8 more years? So at that point, what am I going to have after that? I'd rather have her, not the military. The military's not my desire. So I got my marketplace opened up for, I'm an E6 staff sergeant for the U.S. Army. And my marketplace opened up to where I could put in a request for any openings around the military that around the world that I would want to go to. So I got the whole listing. I think it was like 3 pages of different locations that I could PCS to, that I could move to for my next station. And I sat down with her and I showed her the ones that I preferred based on career progression. And so I highlighted those. I crossed out the ones that would be absolutely terrible for the both of us, whether for me and for her. And I sat down with her and I could tell the anxiety that she was having over the idea of it. And it took a little while to talk about it. It was a really hard conversation for her, the idea of me leaving. And I think I was married before, and I think that I want to say that my ex-wife did marry me out of love and that there was an idea that we would be together for the long term, but I think it was still a little short. The relationship was a little short up to that point of getting married. So I don't think it really reached that point of true love. But with my ex, the nurse in Hawaii, I have never had anybody in my life love me the way that she did. So, forgive me,
Take your time.
So we sat down and we chose a couple of places, and it ended up becoming a request for Fort Leonard Wood, which is currently where I'm at. I requested for an instructor position, and it would be great for my career for many reasons, both if I got out of the military, while in the military, if I wanted to go warrant officer, you name it. Being an instructor is great to have on your record. And so I chose it. Within the next few months, around August, September timeframe, maybe it was right before August, it might have been July. I think it was July when my marketplace had opened up. But it was a late marketplace, so I didn't have much time to prepare once they gave me orders. Once I got the orders, though, and I told my ex-fiance about that, she started having trouble coping with the idea of me leaving. She didn't like to drink. In fact, we hardly ever drank. But there were a couple of nights where, one night particular, which was the start of it, where I came home to her completely drunk. And I guess she was delving into that as a way to try to cope with the fact that I was leaving. I got home to her that way and she was very quiet. And I think she was trying to hide the fact that she was drunk. She was so cute, so adorable. I could tell something was off, but I could see how much she cared about me with how she was coping with it. And then I asked her, I was like, "Are you drunk?" And she most certainly was. She tried to hide it, but she most certainly was. And then she started to become very emotional with me. And so I sat down with her and I told her, "It's okay. Everything's going to be fine. We'll get through this." So I tried to provide that strength and that confidence. And it worked for the most part. We still had some great times before I left the island. And I did get to become engaged to her. I went to school in August here at Leonard Wood, and then I went home and I bought a ring and I took her up a mountain. And it is absolutely ridiculous too, because I got the wrong size ring. It was way too big. I think it was twice the size that it should have been. She has real small fingers. And I took her up a mountain, the highest mountain in Hawaii, and I proposed to her on top of it. And I'll tell you, it was the happiest moment of my life. So we ended up preparing for me leaving, ended up getting all my household goods in order, put my property up for rent. And
was she at this point, was she not planning on moving out with you?
Not immediately. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do. The idea was, knowing that I was going to be staying in the military, that we were going to give it some time and that we were going to get married, and then she was going to move out here. Granted, she's still a work visa, so she can't just make the move. She would have to
either get her Canadian.
Yeah, so she was attached to where she was working because her sponsor was the hospital. So if she left that job, then she would have to go back to Canada. So it provided a lot of difficulty on that part. She just couldn't come out here and just move with me like any other.
Unless you got hitched, that would have solved the problem. But you guys weren't quite ready for that.
No, I think she still needed some time. And so me moving, the military put us into that predicament where now I'm in a fresh engagement. and we're not ready to arrange for the actual ceremony. We're not ready. I don't think she wanted to go and do a courthouse thing, which is usually the go-to for most military.
In a courthouse.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I think that it's up to the two people on what they
Absolutely.
want or what they're okay with. Even if they want something extravagant, it depends on what they're okay with. She wasn't ready for that at that point, and that's okay. She knew she wanted to be with me, but she wasn't ready. And she wore the ring every day. She always had it on. She was so genuine and so in love.
So this sounds great, except that we know that there's not a happy ending. So what happened? Where did it kind of break down?
Capture adventure. Where your story. The Advent Collection, veteran owned and operated, bringing you fantastic apparel, accessories, even pictures made and taken by fantastic veteran Branden Mozeleski. Head on over. The Advent Collection, where your adventure awaits.
So we had these plans. We were going to game nights. We were going to do movie nights. We were going to talk every single day. We always said good morning to good night. This is after I moved. It was pretty good for the first 3 months, but I had this weird feeling, and it was like, I think that we're connected. When we're in a relationship, I feel like we're connected in some sort of like metaphysical way. And I had this real bad dream one night, and I had so much anxiety. It was absolutely terrible. I didn't even know what the dream was. I just knew that I had this feeling from it, and I messaged her and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And then I think a couple days later, she ended the relationship. She wrote me a message and said, "I am so sorry. I don't mean to do this to you. I can't be in this relationship. I don't love you. Nothing else, nothing terrible. We never fought. We always talk about things." And we were trying to figure out where we were going to go. At that point, I had agreed, one, that I was going to get out of the Army, two, that I was going to apply for a GS position over where she's at, or three, that I was going to try to get into the AGR so that way I could be located where she is. But I think it was too much for her to handle, and I think that she felt guilty over it because she had this assumption that I loved the Army. I love certain aspects of the Army, but the Army's only around for 8 more years. And
Was there any cheating or anything, or no?
no,
Good. So do you guys still talk?
no, I kind of
We're all invested now in this story. It can't possibly be over. I know that's not what you're trying to handle it from a different angle. So I'm so sorry, because truly the military, the space, the gap is so incredibly hard. Again, when he got back, I looked at him and I said, because at that point he was going to do 20 years. And I said, "I'm never doing another deployment again." He said, "I just can't do it." I had gotten out of the Army, and I said, I'm not going to do this again. It's too hard. So if you want to do 20 years, go do your 20 years. But you're going to get deployed again, and I can't get through another deployment. It was so incredibly challenging. And much like it sounds like you were ready to do, he gave up his military career. At that point, he was only 4 years in. So the difference between retirement or no retirement, but a big decision. And I actually think in our case, both of us were right. In your case, in both of your relationships, they're both good decisions. It's just so hard on a relationship that otherwise could have been really amazing. It's fair that your first wife said, "Hey, I just want to be in California with my family," right? I can't do that. And it's fair for you to say, "Look, I've got to go to these other places. Like, I can't stay in Hawaii, or I'm going to go somewhere where it's going to maybe be best for both of us." But it is truly a challenge to be in the military. And it is not one of the things that I've noticed just from my time and from also representing people is because of the constant moving, it doesn't give you the safe space to find out and grow with the relationship. It's like, "Oh crap, one of us is getting deployed, so we're going to get married." Or, "Oh no, we're both in the military, so if we get married, then we can move together." That's what happened to my sister. She didn't end up just getting married for that, but her and her now husband were both in the Army, and it was like she was leaving. Okay, do they get married so that they can move together, or do they not? They made the decision to not, and they still ended up getting married. But I'm sure you see it where people you get married a little too soon, or the relationship maybe ends prematurely because of this huge gap that the military adds in it. How did all of this, we'll talk about all of the relationships, how did it affect your mental health and your career development in the military?
I'm a really, really good NCO. I am a fantastic leader. And I think part of that comes from the trials that I've been introduced with and my upbringing. I'll tell you, the first divorce while I was in Europe put me into probably the darkest place I've ever been. I had such an immense depression at that time. And I've spoken in front of groups of people on what it's like to be in that situation. I've spoken in front of them for military. It's the depression is like a black hole and it just sucks you in. And once you get caught in that gravitational pull, I guess you could say, it just, once you get that little bit into that depression, it just pulls you right in. You sleep all day. Well, you may not even be sleeping. Shoot, you probably don't even sleep, but you'll lay there in bed because you have no desire to do anything else. And being in Europe, that's the way it was. But I still had responsibilities, and my supervisors expected certain things of me. Granted, I had a little bit of flexibility, but a lot of the leadership started to look down on me. They would be hard on you, think that's the right approach. And the crazy thing is, even in my darkest moment, I had no idea there was another guy that I worked with, and he was going through depression for a non-relationship issue. And I guess the way that I was handling mine, even though I was in that dark moment, it inspired him. And another friend of mine, he actually helped me when we returned to try to pull me out of the depression. And I think he did for the most part. And what I learned, and this is maybe a tip for anybody listening to this, is that leaders can make such an impact on the people that are under them or around them that can help pull them out of whatever trial that they're dealing with. And by that, it's leading. Take that person to the gym, take them outside of that bubble of depression that they're in and introduce them to other experiences, because really what you need is time. And I hate to say it like that because it's kind of like a cop out for people. You just need time. No, you don't just need time. You need time away from that area of depression, whatever those reminders are. Being home, it puts you back into it because now you don't have any responsibility. You don't have to get out of the car. You don't have to get up from your seat wherever you're eating at. So there's no pressure to do anything. You'll just lay there because you've got no reason to get up. And so having compassion and saying, hey, follow me is probably the best mentality a leader can have. And it applies to the civilian world too. If you know somebody that's having a hard time, say, hey, come with me. Let's go do something. And don't take no for an answer. Not at all. And I think that would help get them out of it because it did with me. And it has with other people that I've led.
So that's amazing. You've had, I think the military absolutely played a whole lot into the success or demise of your relationships. And yet you sit here today and you have learned from it and you've become a better leader from it. And it's given you a different perspective, it sounds like, for dealing with your soldiers from a mental health standpoint. That's really, really commendable. What tip, if you could give one tip that you wish every spouse or potential spouse to one of your service members knew, what would be that one tip or piece of advice that you would really hope that they could ingrain in themselves as they become the spouse of somebody in the military?
So my sisters, one of them is, I have three sisters. They're all younger. So I'm the older brother, the protector. And one of them is in the military currently. She's a E7 and she's married to another service member. And then my other sister is now married to a Marine. And for some reason, she seems to have dated some military in the past. And to both of them, what I've told them is that the greatest thing that you can do when your partner is away for whatever reason is to support them. The emotions, regardless of what's going on, you might feel a certain way, you might think a certain way, but the greatest thing that you can do is stand by your partner. Just have that loyalty, at least for the duration that they're away, because you're going to be introduced with a lot of things that you may not understand. You think you understand, but you may not truly. And the best thing that you can do is understand the one thing, and that is that you are away from each other. You cannot touch each other. You cannot see each other's body language. There are so many things that you're not able to do that a traditional relationship would. So loyalty, be loyal to your partner while they're away. And then when they return, then you see how things go. Try to give a blank slate when they return, and then try to move forward. And if you still feel off, then you deal with it together in person. But you should never base a relationship off of a distance.
The deployment. The deployment is like there's major times in life where you're not supposed to make huge decisions, right? One is like right after you have a baby. One is when you're deployed. I remember when my husband was deployed, and actually is even still, even in through his career and my career, one thing that we've really had to remind each other verbally, which you shouldn't, it seems weird to have to say it, is like, I don't like getting up at 5 a.m. to go to PT either and not getting home until 8 p.m. Like I'm not having a good time. That's what he would say to me. So while I'm wife over here, oh my God, I never see you. You don't help with the kids, everything. He's like, yeah, so this isn't my choice either. I don't want to not be at the mornings or dinners and miss everything. And I think that's a really hard concept. It's like, when you're in the military, you're not choosing to be away all of the time. It's just what happens. And most service members would rather be at home and not in the field and not up at the crack of dawn and not home so late. We also put in rules, and I've talked to people about the rules that we had in place for our deployment. And a lot of people think, oh my gosh, that was so ridiculous, or you were both so controlling in certain ways. But I told him before he deployed, you can't have any friends that are girls. And he was like, what? And I was like, you can't have any. And all of his friends were like, oh my gosh, your wife is so controlling. And I said, so you can't have them for two reasons. One, I'm going to be sitting here across the world just assuming all of the bad things. And like you said, we're not going to be able to reach out and touch or anything. So I don't want my head to be filled with that, right? Yeah. And then the military side of me was like, and I also know what it's like to be stuck, that trauma bonding where you just want your wife all the time. And now you've got this other woman who you're confiding in. I said, just no female friends.
That's
I don't
fair.
know if that saved our marriage, but I can tell you that when he first got home, neither one of us, we said, we're not going to ask each other whether we cheated. We're just going to leave that conversation alone. And we're going to get through relearning how to be married. And it wasn't for like 12 years that I think we were both finally like, so did you ever cheat on me when you were deployed? Which at that point, we didn't cheat. And I said, and I never actually thought, I can actually say I never thought that he was cheating on me. And I think that's because he really respected that rule of like, I don't want you to be friends with any women while you were deployed.
Well, I think what you did was the most important thing. You understood the one thing that would be the most difficult for you, and you gave him the opportunity to give you what you needed. And it sounds like he did. Yeah, you communicated your vulnerability to him, and he responded properly. And I think that that's what relationships need, is to be vulnerable to your partner, tell them what you have difficulty with, and then your partner should be corresponding, saying, hey, I'll give you that.
Especially when you're in the military, because in the military, you add all of the outside factors that you have absolutely no control over. It's getting better over the years. I've been out since 2009, but still it's a slow process. The engines don't move. There's a lot of pushing down some of the thoughts and the feelings. So I so appreciate you being here and taking the time and sharing your experiences. I think the fact that you have taken these experiences to be a better NCO for your soldiers is truly the best thing that can happen, and normalizing it and maybe teaching and guiding them how they can handle a successful relationship, or how they can navigate being in the military with the ups and downs of the relationship. So thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last words for our audience?
No, I would just emphasize on just being loyal to your partner. You can overcome anything as long as you go at it with the right understanding that you are going to do what you need to for your partner. And if both of you go at it that way, then it'll just be 100% giving on both parts. You can overcome anything.
And that is true whether you're in the military or not. I don't know that I've seen a successful relationship ever where there was a breach of the loyalty. But you're right. I think that's really important. So thank you so much, Branden, for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
Join us next time. We're doing a series for veterans this November. So if you would like to share your story as a veteran, or if you know somebody that has a great story, reach out to us. Thank you all for your service.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
That wraps up another episode of Gavels Down, Voices Up. If you found value in our discussion today, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs these insights. Your engagement helps us grow and impact more lives. I'm Rachel King, thanking you for listening and reminding you to speak up, because every voice deserves to be heard.